Hello and welcome to D20 Woodworking, and today we are reviewing Cyclops. Now, if you've been paying attention to this channel or my streams or anything, Cyclops was the hero I was kind of least interested in. I know a lot of people when he was announced were super hyped from him. I think there's a lot of nostalgia attached to Cyclops, which is fine. I get it. I'm a very nostalgic person as well, and a lot of people are seeing this as like the next big thing, right? That Cyclops is going to be the best hero ever. He's going to be so incredibly strong and powerful. And I didn't see it. I'll be honest, I didn't see it. Now, I think there's a couple of reasons for this. One, again, the nostalgia thing. I think I was looking at it slightly differently than most people. Not saying other people were wrong, because I don't think they were really, but we'll get into that in a bit. But I think also I looked through everything, or pretty much everything on this channel through the lens of being a pure solo board gamer, right? One-handed. And I think Scott, Cyclops is weaker pure solo. Like, I think he is. I think it's hard to make the argument that he's a crazy top tier pure solo hero. I just don't think he is. Now, he's better than I thought he'd be. I'll give him that. But I think for multiplayer, and as you add more players, he gets better and better and better. And people that look at this through a 4-player lens, let's say, Cyclops is really good. Right? Cyclops is really good, I think, from a 4-player lens, and then slowly gets worse, right? Not bad, but just like not as good as that one. So that's the quick thing, in case people are wondering, like, if I was just gonna like trash Cyclops or whatever. I'm not. I was actually more impressed with him than I thought I'd be. I still have some serious issues with him though. But what I want to say first is, if you're not yet, make sure you follow me over on twitch.tv/D20 Woodworking. I stream mostly Sundays and Tuesday nights, sometimes on Thursdays, and that's why you need to hit the follow button, turn on notifications, so you know exactly when I do it. And also, if you could do me a huge favor, scroll down a bit, hit the like button, hit subscribe, leave a comment about Cyclops if you agree or disagree with my review, or agree with parts of it, or disagree with parts, or whatever. Comment down below. It helps out the channel. And lastly, if you want to check out, right down there next to the subscribe button is the join button. You can hit that. There's different tiers and benefits and different things to get different perks on this channel and whatnot. And then, it helps support out the channel, because, I always like upgrading things on the channel to make it a better experience for you all. So let's dive into his cards. We'll talk through his cards, and then we'll talk about what I like, what I didn't like, interweave throughout there. And again, I think the important thing to note is, yes, I played him two-handed a couple times, but I primarily look at heroes through a pure solo lens. So keep that in mind as we dive into these cards. All right, so Scott Summers has 3 recoveries, 6 hand size, 10 hit points. Now, one of the cool, interesting things with him was that you may include X-Men allies from any aspect in your deck. And right now, I don't think this is that great of a trait right now. And the reason being is because all the X-Men except for Angel are 3 costs and above, which is pretty expensive, right? It's hard, especially with his pre-con kit. I didn't think was very good. As you add in more cards like the X-Jet and whatever, I think he gets better, substantially better. But I think because the X-Men allies are so expensive right now, that it's kind of tough to play a lot of them. And I think this is just something that will get better with time, right? As they come out with a couple of 2-cost X-Men allies, it'll be easier to play them. This gets even better, right? So I think for now, it's cool, right? It's definitely cool. And I like it. I like this idea for sure. I think that's the big problem right now, is just a lot of the allies are just super expensive. I mean, there's a lot of 4-cost allies already. Storm's a 5-cost. I know it drops down to 4, but still, there's a lot of expensive allies already. So it's hard to like put all those in your deck, because the cost curve just gets way too high. So like I said, I think this gets better with time, but I still like this mechanic. I think it's pretty cool. So constant training, search your deck for a tactic upgrade and add it to your hand, limit once per round. This is nice because you're going to need those tactic upgrades, because when you don't have one, not the deck falls apart, but it gets frustrating, and we'll get into that. All right, so Cyclops is a 2/1/2 hero, drops down to a 5 hand size, has 10 hit points, and you spend 1 resource of any type to deal 3 damage to an enemy with an upgrade attached. This is very frustrating. I'm not going to lie. I grew up with movie Cyclops, who kind of blasted a lot of things a lot of times, and I know people have made the argument that, well, he still lines up his hits, and that's why you have to do it this way. It has an upgrade attached, because you're lining up your hit. Yeah, okay, I get the argument. I still don't like it. I'll be honest. Like, it feels clunky to me. It feels awkward. I think there's a way they could have improved it, and we'll get into it later with his visor, because I think there's something that you could do there that would work a lot better. But this feels clunky. The whole spend 1 resource any type and deal 3 damage to an enemy with an upgrade attached. It feels off, right? There's a lot of times that I blow through all my upgrades, and then I would get my visor, which again we'll get into in a second, and all of a sudden like I can't do it anymore, right? Like I have to wait till I cycle the rest of my deck, or I have to flip down, and in pure solo, that's not the easiest thing to do. So I have to time that just right. It's a whole big thing. So I still don't like Optic Blast. This was my biggest negative of Cyclops when he was announced. I didn't think I would like this, and it turns out in play I don't. I don't like this system. I don't think it's that great. Now again, I think it could have been better with one small thing, and we'll get into that in a second. But let's talk about Phoenix. 3 cost ally, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 life. After Phoenix enters play, choose a Cyclops card in your discard pile and add it to your hand. This is huge. This is a really, really good ally to have, because one, she has a psionic trait, which helps out, what is it, Cerebro, when you can look for different allies in your deck, right? When you control a psionic ally or a psionic character, you can go through your entire deck to look for an ally. So for the Cerebro perspective, and I'll pop Cerebro on the screen so you can see it, having Phoenix out there really helps. Like really, really, really helps. So that's great. Also, the fact that she enters play and puts a Cyclops card in your discard pile and adds it to your hand, this helps what I just talked about with tactics, right? Sometimes your tactics are just stuck out there and you can't do anything. You can play Phoenix. Phoenix helps you out. She's a good ally. Puts that card back in your hand. Now you have more options. So I like Phoenix a lot. I think Phoenix is a really good signature ally. I think she's really, really good. All right, so the Visor. It's a 2-cost upgrade. Exhaust this card to generate an energy resource for your Optic Blast ability. That attack gains piercing and range. Cool. The problem is I still need an attachment, right? And then if I play this card and there's no upgrade attachments, then I just have a dead resource generator that I can't use. And this is where I wish they would have changed this card to one of 2 things, or maybe both if they wanted to make him too powerful. Either you can just use the resource, right? I could just exhaust race and generate a resource to use, which thematically doesn't make 100% sense, so I get it from that perspective. But it would have been nice having this card ignore the upgrade requirement, right? Like if they did the attachment upgrade requirement, right, on Scott, we'll pop to him for a second, so that you have to deal 3 damage to your enemy with upgrade attached. Okay. But if you get the Visor, it would have been nice if they got rid of that requirement, because it's like, hey, it's a better Visor, right? Like you upgrade your Visor, so thus you don't need an attachment, right? You don't need to be as accurate because it itself is already so good or something. I don't know. There's ways to do this. I think it would have made this Visor better. I would play this Visor, and there'd be times where, again, now it's kind of just a dead resource out there, and I wasted 2 resources at the turn before or whatever else, or that current turn. It kind of stunk. I'm not gonna lie. It was kind of like this weird spot to be in where, yes, it was nice to generate the resource when there happened to be attachment on that villain or that minion, but it felt rough to get there. Like it felt clunky all around. I still don't like it. It's probably my biggest gripe with Cyclops. I know I'm being really negative about Cyclops right now. This might be it right now, because this was the worst part to me, is the whole Optic Blast thing. It still bothers me. I still don't think it's that well done. And I think the Quartz Visor could have been done better. Again, I know I'm being really negative right now, but it gets better. That was my biggest thing. Field Commander, it's a multiplayer card game, or a card for multiplayer. The reason being is because now you take your first turn, which is fine. But each Cyclops upgrade attached to a minion loses a temporary keyword, which is really, really nice, especially if there's a bunch of minions out there. It's an easy way to help out everyone on the table, which is really cool, right? So this is a good multiplayer card. For solo, I tried to use it. It was fine. Like it wasn't needed, but it was fine. All right, so exploit weakness. Huge card. 1 cost upgrade tactic. Attach enemy, 1 per enemy. It's a temporary card. So increase the amount of damage the attached enemy takes from each attack by 1. Now, even from a solo perspective, this was really nice to have, right? Optic Blast now does 4, right? Some of his stronger attacks do 1 more. Some do a lot more, which we'll get into like Ricochet Beam in a second. So this card was really, really good to have out there as much as humanly possible. And again, this scales with multiplayer, right? Because if everyone is doing attacks now, like everyone is now doing +1 attack minimum. And that's not including like the event cards they play or anything else, right? Again, I think this is the big thing with Cyclops is he's fine for solo. He's better than what I thought he would be. But for multiplayer, he just keeps getting better, right? And I think for a 4-player game, he'd be really strong. But yeah, so exploit weakness. I like this card. I think this was a card I played pretty much all the time. It was really good. I liked it. So that's that one. All right, so practice defense. This was actually a really nice card to have a lot. I used it more than I thought I would. Attach enemy gets -1 attack. 0 cost upgrades tactic. maximum per enemy, temporary. Yeah, so I really liked this card. Because on paper it's like, all right, someone goes from like a 2 to a 1 attack. How great is that? It turns out that's really helpful. It's really, really nice. Or if you had a minion out there and you had field commander on, there was just a 1 attack minion, you could put this on, just like ignore that minion for a while, which is like a really nice benefit to have, and that was really cool. So I like this card. Again, this scales more with more players because now every player is going to get attacked for less. You could just assume this with all the upgrades at this point. But this is a pretty good card. It's pretty solid. I'm happy it was a 0 cost card. It was a nice card to like easily get out there to be able to use my Optic Blast. And there's 2 of those. And then priority target. 0 cost upgrade. When attached enemy is defeated, the player who defeated it draws 2 cards. In solo, this doesn't work that well unless you're playing like a super heavy minion deck. Because again, if you were just putting this on the villain, you're probably not defeating the villain. Like when I timed it right, it was nice because you draw 2 cards, but it was a tough card to play. But it was nice because now again, I can use Optic Blast when I normally wouldn't be able to for a 0 cost. That's basically what this card was used for. It was just a way for me to play Optic Blast. I'm not gonna lie. It wasn't bad, but I think if you're playing a more minion heavy deck, it makes a lot more sense. And if there's obviously more people out there and there's like a strong minion that you're all teaming up there for, it's nice to try to figure out who should defeat it to get the card draw right. There's ways that you can game the system for that, which is pretty nice. But a lot of times, if I got the 2 cards out of it, that's really good. But really, I was using it just so I could play Optic Blast. There's 2 of them in there. So that's all the attachments, right? So I think that's all of them. There's 6 of them in there. 6 in a 40 card deck. Kind of rough. I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of rough. So that's why it stinks that it does happen more often than not, and you do need to flip down a lot to try to get more of these tactics in there, right? Because if you go down to really quick, I don't know why this is highlighted all of a sudden. Hold on. There we go. Because again, if you flip down to constant training, search your deck for a tactic upgrade and add it to your hand, right? So you do need to flip down with them a lot, but if there's a low threshold on the villain, again, for pure solo, this kind of is a bit rough. So there are ways to get the tactics back in your hand, but for solo, it is tougher to do. And that's what makes Phoenix, honestly, that much better. The signature ally Phoenix. All right, full blast, 1 cost event. When you use your Optic ability, exhaust Cyclops. This attack deals 8 additional damage, right? So it goes from 3 now up to, was that 11, if I can math correctly, and gains overkill. I didn't use this card that much, right? Like realistically, I didn't use it that much because exhausting Cyclops was rough, and I'd rather keep Cyclops unexhausted to use the 2 thwart somewhere else. Like the 2 thwart was super useful to have. And there's like, it's not bad, right? If you get it paired with the upgrade, let me show you really fast. The where is it? The exploit weakness that takes 1 additional damage from each attack, right? So it goes from 8, 9, 10, 11 up to 12, right? You can do 12 damage. Okay, like that's fine, and you have to exhaust your hero. That's not bad. But like it was one of those weird cards that I feel like I didn't play that much. Like you had to line up certain things in the right order, I guess, is a part of the problem, right? You had to make sure that you had this card. You had to make sure that there's attachment on and that you can use the Optic Blast ability. And then you had to exhaust Cyclops and keep him up. Like there was some weird things that had to go on here that I felt like I didn't use full blast that much. Maybe a handful of times. But what I did use a lot is this card, Ricochet Beam, which was a gross card. It's super good. 2 cost event, deal 3 damage to enemy, deal 3 damage to an enemy with upgrade attached. Now, if you have, again, the upgrade exploit weakness that takes 1 additional damage, this is a 4/4 card, which is crazy. And if you put it on the villain, right, that's like you do 4 damage to the villain and then another 4 damage to the villain as long as that's the upgrade attached, right? So that's 8 damage. Then if you still had your Visor with your optics thing, that would do another 4 damage. We're at 12. So it's like the same as the full blast, plus Scott or Cyclops is still readied up, right? So like that's a part of what I'm talking about where I use Ricochet Beam more than I use full blast, it seemed like. I really like Ricochet Beam. It was a really good attack card to have. And again, it was nice that, okay, if there was a weak minion out there, boom, do some damage there and then pop over and then do damage to the villain, right? It's good. It's really good. I really like this card. Tactical Brilliance was also a huge card, and this was one that it stunk when you had. So I think there's 3 of them. Yeah, it's 3 of them. It's stunk when you got like 2 or 3 of them in your hand at the same exact time. But remove 3 threat from a scheme and choose a tactic card in your discard pile to add to your hand. That's huge, right? Getting those tactic cards back out there, you need it. Tactical Brilliance is kind of the crux of a lot of things for solo, right? You need to make sure you get Tactical Brilliance out there. One, to threat or to do threat removal, but two, to get those tactic cards back in your hand, because you need to have them back in your hand to do Cyclops' main ability. The Optic Blast, that is. All right, and then we'll really talk about this Lost Visor Obligation. Search your hand, deck, discard pile, and play area for Ruby Visor and place it face down on this card. Cyclops cannot attack. It's an alter ego, exhaust Scott Summers, add Ruby Quartz Visor to your hand, and remove Lost Visor from the game. This is kind of like not a bad obligation. Like if you got this obligation early on and Ruby Quartz Visor was on the bottom of your deck, right? You could get it pretty fast, essentially. Like there are ways that this obligation actually helps you. Now it stinks that you can't attack, but if you can flip down to Cyclops, exhaust, and then put Visor into your hand, and it would normally be on the bottom of the deck, right? Like that's pretty cool. That works in your favor. So this obligation a lot of times wasn't that bad. I mean, it stunk that you couldn't attack sometimes, but yeah, you flip down pretty fast. Okay, like there you go, right? And especially when it worked out that you were already flipped down, because that happened quite a few times where I had this obligation. I was already Cyclops, so I just exhausted them, or Scott, not Cyclops. I exhausted them, and then I got my Visor for free. Not for free, but I got into my hand when I didn't expect it to be. So it was kind of like a weird obligation that isn't terrible, which was kind of nice. All right, so Cyclops Nemesis, Mr. Sinister, a 1/1/6, Stalwart, Toughness, Villainous. He's rough. He's rough to get as a boost card too. We're getting stunned. That's always rough for Cyclops being stunned. Genetic Manipulation and hand. When defeated, search the encounter deck and discard pile for Gene Therapy and reveal it. Gives you a boost icon and everything to thwart. So Gene Therapy adds 2 attack. Attach the enemy with the lowest printed attack without a copy of Gene Therapy. Otherwise, cards gain Surge. When attached enemy attacks, the attacks gain Overkill and Piercing. At the end of this attack, discard Gene Therapy. And then lastly is Concussive Force. Alter Ego, Mr. Sinister schemes. And if he's not there too, you place 2 throw on the main scheme. And if you're in hero, he attacks you. And if he's not there, you do damage, right? That's all fine stuff. The rest of his cards, we didn't really talk about them that much. Utopia is a bonkers card in here. Like, it's just a really good card. After an X-Men ally enters play, which is what you want to do with Cyclops anyway, you ready an X-Men character. Like Cerebro, Utopia, and X-Jet are all like kind of must-haves for Cyclops, and they're really good. And the allies are pretty good that came with this. We won't go too much into them, but yeah. That's basically what came with this deck. Let's talk about my overall thoughts then. Overall, again, I went in with super low expectations for Cyclops, and he exceeded them. Right, he was better than I thought he would be. Because the way I saw him is he'd be really good for multiplayer and kind of bad for solo. And he's not terrible for solo. Again, you can get stuck in these awkward situations where you just don't have the ability to get a upgrade tactic to put on an enemy, and you can't do your Optic Blast. And it's really kind of stinks when then you play for the Ruby Quartz Visor and it's just kind of sitting there doing nothing. So that always felt weird. Again, that's my biggest gripe. I know I'm harping on that, but it kind of stinks. It kind of stinks to do that. Now, what's kind of interesting with Cyclops, and I alluded to this before, is that a lot of the allies are really expensive in this game so far, right? We only have 1-2 cost ally for X-Men. All the rest are 3+. I think Cyclops continues to get better as more cheap allies come out, because to be able to put out some cheap allies out there is going to be really helpful, right? Especially of different aspects and whatnot. So I think that's gonna be really good, really helpful. Tactical Brilliance is a really good card. I was really happy with that. I was happy with this kit, I guess, overall for solo. Again, I don't think he's that great of a true solo hero. When I played him two-handed, he was better. He was a lot better. It was a lot more fun to play him because he could flip down, work on getting his tactics back out, and kind of be more of this. I don't want to call him a support hero because he's not really a support hero per se, but being able to get allies out there and to block for my other hero who I was using mostly Phoenix and then Colossus, I think. But I used him kind of as a support for the other hero, while the other hero was able to like manage the board and do all this stuff. Scott was okay putting tactic upgrades out there to like help the other hero out and himself, right? It was easier to flip down to Scott to be able to get those tactic upgrades back into your hand, right? So doing that more often, like doing that, being able to do that easier and more often really helped Cyclops out, because then it was just tactic over tactic over tactic. Like I was able to keep getting them out, and it felt good then. Like I felt really good to play him. For true solo, it's tougher to do that. It's not as bad as I thought it would be, but it's still rough, and there are times that you just get kind of stuck and you can't really do anything. But if everything kind of falls your way and you get the tactics at the right time, you get the visor at the right time, and you get a decent draw, he's good, right? He's good. I don't think he's overpowered or anything. And this will probably be a future theme in another video, is that I think a lot of the X-Men aren't overpowered, and that's probably a good thing, but we'll get into that sometime in the future. Spoiler alert for future video. But I think for Cyclops, he's fine, right? He's fine. I enjoyed him more than I thought I would, is what I'll say. I think he makes more sense in multiplayer. I think he makes a lot of sense in a huge multiplayer game. I think he would do exceptionally well in a 4-player game. Hopefully we'll get to test him out and do that soon. But again, for pure solo, like I think he's okay to good, right? He's okay to good. He's better than I thought he'd be. So that's it. I think that's really it. Again, I know a lot of this review seemed kind of negative, but it's just there was so many times in games where just like I couldn't use Optic Blast, and it was frustrating. Like it was just frustrating. And I hate that feeling of the game where it feels like I'm fighting against the game to do what the game like kind of wants me to do anyway, right? Or doing things that thematically make sense. Like it always feels like rough, and I always hate that feeling in games. So anyway, that's my overall thoughts. Pretty good hero. I enjoy him. He's fine. He's better than I thought he'd be. I guess that's it. So, like I said before, do me a huge favor, scroll down, hit the like button, hit subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts about Cyclops. I'm sure most people out here will probably disagree with a lot I have to say about him, because a lot of people really like Cyclops. And not everyone plays, true solo with him, so I get that argument too. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down there. And if you want to support this channel, next to the subscribe button, hit the join button. There's different tiers that give you different benefits to the channel. If you want to support me, I greatly appreciate it. And yeah, hope you enjoyed this video.